Hello. Before we start, I want to use the introduction to do something which I usually don't do in a video. I want you to pause and think about something. So you don't really have to pause the video. So my question to you is, what would you think about when I tell you, okay, you have to improve your product analytics setup next year? So what are the things that you would plan to do based on what you think is not working really well? Do you have one or two ideas? Very good. So you can use this to map what I will be presenting today. I have the suspicion that I will show you something today that potentially you don't have on your map. And so this is why this video might be really helpful for you, because I'm trying to cover 3 areas that you can start to invest that really can make an impact where you maybe did not, you can make an impact. Okay, this sounds like a lot of build-up. I will get into the topic to show you what I mean by that. So today I want to talk about creating a product analytics and growth intelligence roadmap for 2026. So what are these two? I think product analytics is pretty straightforward. We want to understand how our product is performing. Growth intelligence is the discipline when I take my product data and take my marketing data and take my revenue data and bring it all together to then use the product marketing data to, for example, predict revenue changes. Okay, how many I can get into paid accounts, how many potentially expanding their accounts in the next 4 weeks, and also more important, how many of our current accounts will be churning in the next 4 to 8 months, which accounts will be churning in the next 4 to 8 weeks, because we can already see that their activity is dropping significantly. So this is what I mean with growth intelligence. But growth intelligence, I can already tell you, it comes really much at the bottom because we have to lay a lot of foundation. So I will ask you another question. How's your business doing? So this is a natural question, maybe not the natural question that you ask yourself within one company every day or every week, but maybe on a monthly basis, like you have a monthly check-in meeting where you think about, okay, how's actually our business doing? It could also be that you have some investors who will ask the question, okay, how's the business doing? Or you talk to a bank or whatever. It's a common question. And luckily, there are common tools that can tell you how your business is actually doing. We can start on the left. So the simplest way, and obviously this only works when you have a very small business, but on a small business, it's often how it works, is you just look at your bank account. So is there enough money in the bank account? And you have a rough idea what kind of costs are usually coming up each month. You have a pretty good idea how your business is doing. Obviously, it's a very limited view on how your business is doing, but sometimes this is completely enough. Then you have profit and loss, or the P&L, the classic accounting output. So this already tells you a lot more. So it gives you a good breakdown about, okay, how actually revenue is generated, and it also gives you a good breakdown on what kind of stuff you are actually spending money. P&L definitely can answer the question, how is your business doing? Because you can also look back, you can potentially do some predictions in the future. So that's actually already a good and solid foundation to answer this question. Obviously, the more you grow, the more complex your setup might get, so then you will add some controlling. So controlling builds on top of the P&L data and will introduce specific, let's say, different kind of angles to look at this data. So they will look potentially more into more revenue analysis, so they will get a better understanding how revenue in general is developing, so they get better in predicting revenue. This is what controlling can do, and controlling usually then also works closely with BI. So business intelligence is then like you bring all these different kind of aspects into different kind of reports so that more people can access this, and also like more people can potentially break it down by different kind of dimensions. So with these 4 things, I hope you can answer how is your business doing, and I think at least like you have a very fair chance to answer how your business is doing. So let's make the thing a little bit more complicated. Let's go to the next question. What if I ask you how your product is doing? So that's a tricky one. I ran a workshop where I was asking the same question, and I definitely had some people in the audience who had some ideas how they actually can answer this, and they had really good answers. But in general, ask yourself, how would you answer how your product is actually doing? maybe your answer is, it depends. Maybe we have to define what doing actually means. But here the problem already starts. And so let me break it down what usually the opportunity, or let's say what usually the options are to answer this question. And so sometimes you just use what you have done. So what kind of features you have shipped. Then you would look into your Jira, Linear, or whatever kind of tool you're using to track this thing. And then you say, our product shipped these kind of features. So this is how our product is doing. And it sounds a little bit ridiculous, but it's an answer that I get quite often. When I ask people, how's your product actually doing? They answer with the work that they have done for the product, which is not really answering about how the product is doing. It's more, what have you added to the product? Then obviously a lot of people would say, hey, yes, of course, we use product analytics to answer this question. But the tricky thing is, like, what can you actually really answer with your current product analytics tool setup? So potentially you can answer something like engagement is up, so you know, okay, these are the new accounts that we got into our product. Pretty likely that you can answer this with your product analytics tool. You might have some funnels in there where you can say, oh yeah, we improved the onboarding funnel. So you see, look, this is snapshot from now, this is snapshot from 12 months ago, and here you can see, like, we now get 10% more through it. But does it say something how the product is doing? Also not really. So then often what happens is, like, someone says, okay, look, we really need to get some basics inside how the product actually is doing. So how are we growing? How are we converting, let's say, new accounts into subscriptions and so on? So then this ends up that someone has to go along and has to write some custom queries. Often, like, it's not even like happening in any data warehouse. So it's okay, we have our application database. Yeah, here we have some Stripe data. So maybe just pull it down and then we bring it together, sometimes in a spreadsheet, and then we just make an analysis, and then here we go. So we're trying to answer a little bit about how our product is doing. The, let's say, pro version of this is then we bring this all together into BI and to answer some parts of how the product is doing. But it's often when you bring product data, or let's say usually from the application database, the end result of product activity, then it's usually like you answer some basic stuff. So you know, okay, we have that many new accounts. You also know, okay, we have that many new subscriptions. So obviously, then you can just divide them by each other, and then you have a conversion rate. Which again, I don't go into this. This is tricky because this is actually a fault conversion rate. So you can check out one of my latest videos where I was talking about why you cannot sometimes just compare two numbers that happens to be reported in the same months, but actually not really in the same months. Anyway, but it's inherently difficult to answer this question, how's your product doing? And this is what I'm trying to do in this session today, is like to give you some ideas how you can potentially answer this question in a better way. So let's move down. So yes, obviously you can ask yourself how you currently answer the question, how's your product doing? So keep this in mind. And so I will give you some potentially new ideas, or maybe not. Maybe you already do the stuff that I'm showing you. Problem number one, obviously there's no product P&L, no product profit and loss. So the nice thing about a P&L is it's a standardized format. It's a very reduced format. Everyone who has invested some time to understand what a P&L means, what it includes, can just understand it. So they can go through any kind of business P&L and have an immediate idea where this business is right now. They don't have the full picture, obviously, because there are things that are not in a P&L. So, for example, you can already have some future, let's say, some future proposals signed or something like this. This is usually not in a P&L. It depends on how you do things. But let's say, obviously, it's not the full picture, but actually you have a right good picture. But something like this doesn't exist for a product, which is a little bit of a shame because, like, it would make things so much easier. But let's imagine if we would build this for a product, how would it look like? So it would most likely have other different kind of areas. And so I just created 4 areas that I would say I would put into a product P&L. So the first one is reach. Reach is basically the volume that we put into the product. This means like new people, new accounts coming into our product on a regular basis. Then I also take it one step further, because obviously just getting new people into a product is not really hard when you spend a lot of money on marketing. The interesting thing is, do they actually also end up to understand what this product is about? So in my terms, can we get them activated? So this is what activated actually means. So like in the first 7 days, they do something meaningful where we would say, I think they got what the product is about. So this is what happens in reach. So in reach, we can see, okay, are we actually even building up opportunities? Because this is what it is. So when you get new accounts into this, you have an opportunity that you can convert them to whatever you want to convert them. Next up is engagement. So the tricky thing with products is it's not one-time buy, and then there are some products who are one-time buy. Most of the products right now is that you run on some kind of renewal, so be it a classic subscription model or maybe on a license model that renews every year. So in the end, people have to use this stuff. So if no one is using your product, obviously this doesn't work out. So the next level will become really important to understand, okay, how does retention look like? And I'm not talking about retention curves. Retention curves are an interesting aspect. It's a really great tool, but often it's much too complicated to really. So you won't put a retention curve into a P&L. So you have to have some metrics that represent this. Obviously, connected with engagement is value delivery. So I will explain in a second what's the difference between both is. Engagement in the end means that we just look if people are still showing up and they're still doing reasonable things. On value delivery, we go into more details to see what kind of value is our product actually generating. And this is not like, are we actually generating any value at all? No, it's also like breaking down what kind of value are we generating? Because this is super important for any kind of growth strategy. So product usually generates different kind of outcomes. There are very rare products that usually just have one outcome. Often there are multiple outcomes, and these multiple outcomes will have multiple different monetary results. And speaking about monetary results, this is the last part here, which is value capture. So once you have delivered value, so this is quite interesting. So we have two-time value here. Value delivery is only about what we deliver to our customers. So if customers can get some value delivered, value capture is about us as a business. So once we have delivered value to our customers, can we capture value for us? Which in a lot of cases is money, but it doesn't have to. So if you run a non-profit organization, obviously it doesn't have to be money, then it's something else. Okay, it could be potentially be donations, so then it's money again. But it could also be something else, it could be awareness. So you define what you want to capture as an organization. Most of the time it's money. But that's the interesting distinction. So we have two-sided value here. First, the value that our product is generating for you as a customer, and then the value that you are happy to give us in return because we give you some value before. So this is the last area. So let's have a quick look how this could look like. So we do this by just asking 4 different questions. And with these 4 different questions, I want to give you some ideas what you would put into these 4 different areas. So the question for reach is like that you can tell me how many new accounts started using your product this month and the percentage that reached their first value moment. New accounts potentially is very straightforward. It might be already something that you already have. One thing that you can think about is, are we actually reporting on users or are we actually reporting on accounts? So you might have a product that can have one account or multiple users. So then usually it's better to move up on the account level and to report on that. But if you have a setup where one user has one account, then obviously it's just the user. But new accounts is usually something that most of the setups can answer already right now. So I hope you can answer this already too. But then comes the second one, and this is first value, or what I usually call activated. In the end, in this case, then activated accounts. So the interesting thing is it sounds pretty straightforward, but it has some complexity in it. We get to this later on, what we have to build to actually can answer this question, what activated means. But it means that you have to come up with a solid definition of activated. This means activated, I would say, is one of the nicest area that you can invest your time, because you have this very short window of opportunity when you get someone to create a new account in your product. There is a lot of build-up that has happened before that. So somehow people got aware of your product. somehow they are aware of a problem they want to solve. Somehow they have now the motivation and potentially also the time to see if your product actually is solving their problem and if your product can give them the right progress they're looking for. So this is the big opportunity moment. So they create a new account. Rarely people just create a new account and say, oh yeah, maybe I do this in 2 months or so. So no, usually they create an account and they want to do the stuff now. So now's the opportunity. So you have a short window of time. This is, for example, like why when I define an activated account definition, I always have a time period in it where I say, okay, when this set of events or activities don't happen in this time period, we will never flag them as activated, because we can assume that when no one has done this, let's say in the first 7 days after they have created their account, there's still a chance that they might still try it out later on. But we can say after that, we lost this opportunity. We lost this account because we couldn't convince the person behind this account to invest and to understand how our product works, but they didn't figure it out. So they basically struggled in the process. And so you can ask yourself, you try out new products, you can ask yourself, how many products have you tried, invested half an hour to figure out how it works, and then you never touch them again. My list is pretty long. And this is what we're trying to capture here. We want to capture if someone actually is activated, because this is step number 1. So if we fail on this, and if we define activated properly, then this becomes our first indicator in our whole conversion journey. So when we have a well-defined activated definition, then everyone who will not be activated has, let's say, a under 5% of chance that they will ever end up in a subscription. So this is a lost opportunity for us. And if we want to optimize things, then this is a good area to do so, because activated accounts and new accounts can generate an activation rate is a really great indicator you can start to work on and optimize on. Even only what we can do already in block number 1 is pretty powerful, and it's often missing in a lot of setups. So if you want to start to invest in one thing, you can start here. We will get back to this later in a second, where I can show you which kind of areas you should invest. So question number 2, engagement. So we're going one level up. So let's say they at least understood how basically our product works. It doesn't mean that we have won them over yet, because just because we showed it one time doesn't also tell us something if we even did something valuable. It could be that someone does the right thing in the application. So let's say we are task management. They created a project, they created some tasks, maybe they also ticked off some tasks and so on. So they know how the product works, but it's still far away of any kind of value delivery. So maybe we would have defined our activation as, oh, they also invited some other users into it, which is a stronger signal of someone is convinced that the system will work out. But still, the even stronger signal is that people are coming back. So obviously, we have an active user metric in every product analytics tool. The problem is it's a very generic active user metric. So it just means someone did something, showed up, logged in. They could have just went into the system and downloaded the invoice because they needed, because the finance teams was asking for it. We would still flag them as active because they showed up. And so like these tools say, okay, when one event from this user comes back, we flag them as active. Honestly, this shouldn't be enough for you. So you should apply the same thing that you have applied to define activated, you will define on active. So you will have different kind of use cases that you can map out, and you would say, okay, if a user or an account is doing one of these use cases again in a defined time period, so for example, when you are business software as a service, let's say within a month. So they do one of these outcomes within a month. So once they do this, we flag them as active. And when we have done this, then we can also calculate some retention rates. So then we can say, okay, how does the first month's retention rate look like? So after you have basically start to measure activation rate, first month's retention rate would be the next one that I would go for. Because then you can see, okay, we are so good in activating people in the first 7 days. How well are we actually doing them to move them over for another 4 weeks? So how many of these are actually coming back after 1 month? Because we can assume if they don't come back after 1 month or within the next 4 weeks, so this is like the period we are looking at, then we can assume that most likely they will not come back in month number 2. So this is the next area where you can start to optimize. And obviously you can then go to 3 months retention, 6 months retention, 12 months retention. But the nice thing is, like, instead of a cohort curve, here you get a solid number. And this is something you can put in a P&L. All right, so next one, value deliverable. This is pretty close to what we have in engagement, but here engagement is more on a high level. Yes, we define different kind of outcomes, but we basically just group them all together and say, okay, when someone does one of these outcomes, we are happy. So with value deliverable, we want to understand which kind of outcomes these actually are. So we're breaking down the active accounts by these different kind of outcomes. And so what does outcome mean? Outcome means your product produced something valuable for the users. Let's take Excalidraw here, which I'm using right now to show you all this stuff. Obviously, for me, it creates some value because I can create something, I can show you something. Now we can think about how can we measure that. Right now, for Excalidraw, it would be really hard to measure that because what I'm doing right now is very hard to distinguish between me maybe working in something. Yes, they could come up with a really fine-tuned measurement where they would say, okay, when someone has a board open for longer than 10 minutes, and they are just moving around and they do very few edits, this might be that this user is just presenting it. Try it to see if this creates some useful numbers. Maybe it does. But maybe another thing could be like Excalidraw could also add what Miro has. They could add a present button so that I can just press the button. It doesn't do something, so it hides like all the elements that they usually don't hide. But it's very useful for understanding how people are using it because it gives us a really strong signal that someone actually is using this for presentation. And presentation is an outcome. Another outcome, which they can measure, is that I share the whole board with the people who, for example, have attended the workshop. So they have a share option, so I can go in there, I can say, okay, this board is now public, here's the link, and then I can send it to people. Again, this is an outcome, but it's a different outcome, for example, like when I just work into the product. So working on a board is another outcome. So they can say, okay, when someone has added at least 10 new assets to a board, or if someone has created a new board within the last 30 days, we say like, he basically ticked off the editing outcome. So he or she is still working on the setup, which is great for us. The nice thing is when we start to break everything down by different kind of outcomes, we can also see the impact of outcomes then later, first of all, into retention, and also like later into revenue, which makes it really powerful. I can tell you, the major question that product teams give is what kind of feature or what kind of set of features are actually contributing to revenue? I find it more interesting what kind of use cases is actually contributing to revenue, because it tells a much stronger story. And this is something what we try to do here to understand. So we can take what we have in the engagement step and we just break it down by the 3 core outcomes. And then we have active accounts, and then we have the retention also by outcome as well. So how long do our people actually keep editing? How long are they keep presenting, and so on. And now we come to the last part, which means we go to value capture. And this means like we take everything that we've done before. So we have, let's say, active to subscription rate. We have different kind of rates that we have calculated. And now we can take them and we can point them, because like here now we are basically pointing them to the subscription, and now we can analyze if actually the whole work that we did before is telling us something about revenue. So for example, when we take all our new subscribers and then we break them down by, okay, how many of these have been activated accounts and how many of these have been non-activated accounts. Let's say we have a 90 to 10. So 90% of new subscribers have been activated accounts before. It tells us 2 things. The first thing is it tells us that our activation definition is actually really good. And the second thing it tells us is a conversion rate from activated user to subscription. And this is something where we can again work on. So it's something like it gives us an opportunity to say, let's say this is 30%. But we already know that if someone is already activated, they are already on the journey that we can get them to a subscription, because from the numbers we also know someone doesn't get activated, it's very unlikely that they end up in a subscription. This makes it powerful, and this is what I actually mean with growth intelligence. So this gives us the possibility to take insights that we have collected before in product analytics and map them to revenue impact. So the same thing is with churn risk accounts. Based on usage, based on our active, our retention, we can flag an account to be at risk, which means is like they did something, they worked with outcomes, let's say 8 weeks ago, but they haven't done it in the last 4 or 5 weeks. We would flag this account as at risk. We would say maybe they're just on vacation. We don't know. We just flag them as at risk. So we keep this flagging for maybe 2 months. If they then don't even show up anymore, we will flag them as dormant. If these are still on a subscription, we can also flag the subscription as likely to churn. What we can also do is reach out to them and ask, hey, what's going on? Because they haven't churned yet. They have churned in the usage, but they haven't churned in the subscription yet. So this gives us a nice window of opportunity to reach out to them and see, okay, actually, what can we do to improve that? And obviously, it goes on the other side as well. So we will see, based on specific outcomes, for example, one outcome is keep inviting other people. And obviously, when we have a seat-based model, let's say, okay, our plans are like, okay, you can have up to 10 people in the first plan, and then you have to switch to another one where you then have a by seat price, whatever. But then let's say we have an outcome that people are constantly over the last months always invite 1 or 2 persons. We already know this account will expand. So there's a very high chance that they actually will invest some money and move to a different plan. We're seeing you making really great progress here. Here's a discount. We can already move you this month on this new plan. Do you want to do this? Yes or no? So we can support them with spending more money with us. So this is the nice thing that we can do in the last level, where we can actually take everything that we know about the product performance and then map it to revenue performance. So what are your 3 actions for 2026? And I just have 3. It's not a huge backlog, but I can tell you these things don't come easy, what I have in there. So it might actually take a year to get there. But the first one I think is definitely doable. So because, as you already have learned, to define activated and to define active is an ongoing process. And it's not an easy process. It's a process that needs a lot of refinement, a lot of measurement to see if these numbers actually add up. It means, ideally, you sit down with the right kind of people. So this means you don't just sit down with the product team. I highly advise to also bring in customer success, sales, marketing, customer support, developers as well. So bring them all together. Everyone who has some idea what the product is actually doing, and also like how the product is delivering values for customers. So bring them all together and try to define what are the value outcomes that your product creates and when do they happen. Because when you have done this kind of exercise, then you can define how you want to define account activated. So you have an idea about the time frame. Again, this needs testing. So I usually start with a time frame of 7 days, but obviously you can also go lower. The nice thing is like you can start to analyze activated accounts, and you can analyze the time, how long it took them to become activated. And then you create, let's say, 4 different segments of, okay, within the first 2 hours, within the first 12 hours, 24, 3 days, 6 days, whatever, no, 7 days. And then you can analyze if this breakdown by time actually has an impact on everything else that happens later. So you want to look into people who got activated within the first 2 hours. Are they more likely to stick around with the product? Yes or no? If you don't find any kind of evidence that the time when people get activated within the first 7 days has any kind of impact on their retention later on, then you can just forget it. Then this information is not useful. Then you just pick a reasonable time frame, because you might figure out that actually no one shows up after 6 days. So then you just reduce the time frame to define activated, and then you just stick with that. But if you find different kind of differences between, hey, fast activator are performing much better than slower activators, it gives you 2 things. First of all, you can introduce 2 activation metrics like fast activators, slow activators. And second of all, you can optimize your product that more people get into the fast activator segment. So this is powerful. I can tell you, this is really powerful. And you will do the same thing with when an account is active. For example, to figure out what kind of outcomes do we have. Because first of all, you need to have some outcomes to define what active means, because this is actually, did they achieve one of these outcomes? But then again, as I had in the second step, you want to break it down by these outcomes, because you want to understand what of these outcomes are actually really powerful, because you might underestimate some. And it's a nice step before you go into feature analysis to just go into outcome analysis. It's easier to track than feature analysis. If you just do one thing with your setup, this is the thing. It's also an interesting exercise when you do this in a cross-team exercise, because like you will get a lot of different views and ideas about that. And alone just this discussion usually, and then because you have to define something, so you force everyone to bring it down to very simple definitions, is a very helpful exercise for every company. So even if you don't track anything of that, I would still recommend to do this exercise. Okay, step number 1. And step number 2 might already be a bigger thing for you. But the good thing is, like, times definitely have changed. If I would have said the same thing to you 5 years ago, I guess more people would have said, no, this is definitely not an option. So it's called connect your data. And so like it sounds very, how to say, very high level, but what it actually means is like you bring everything together in one place. In a step 1, this can be a spreadsheet. A lot of startups have this magic spreadsheet that is telling them how they're performing. This is a good first step because like it gives you a good idea which kind of metrics actually really make sense. And there you bring it together. You have marketing data in there, you have product data in there, you have revenue data in there. This data has some risk in it. So again, like you can check my cohort retention reporting video where I show what, let's say, what danger is within the spreadsheet reports. But still, it's a good baseline to get started. So the other thing is, the next step of this is like you bring it all together in a data warehouse. Hopefully you already have a data warehouse because your BI team is already doing some reporting within the data warehouse. This is good because like then in the end you just have to extend it. Then you say, okay, we bring in our behavioral data also in it, maybe also we bring some marketing data in it, and then we can calculate these metrics that we just have defined before. So we can have a very solid definition, and these are just 10 metrics that you calculate. But let's say we add them, we create some data models, and then we calculate these metrics, because here we have the possibility to match it all up. So here we have the possibility on account level to say, okay, this account got activated. Then also like we know the time when they got activated. Then we know how long are they currently active? How long have they been active? So how long is their streak of active? Then we can calculate the retention. So we can say, okay, this account is still in the 1 month retention. It's still in the 3 months retention. It's still in the 6 months retention, but it actually is not anymore in the 9 months retention. So we can do a lot of things, but this is only possible in a data warehouse. I would say the time that you should invest in a data warehouse setup comes faster, because I would say most of the insights that you just get out of a product analytics tool is limited, because these insights usually don't really tell you how's your product doing. It just tells you how people are using your product. And these two things are two separate things. So I would say this is your next step, to bring it all together in a data warehouse, and then build your first product P&L. So you can do this on a spreadsheet, you can do it based on the warehouse. But the exercise here is develop a format with 10 metrics, maybe even less, 5, 6 metrics. But these metrics are well defined, they are well monitored, they are well checked, and they are used every month to answer the question, how is our product doing? So you will have an activation rate. This activation rate will tell you how well are all the new accounts that we bring in are doing, and you will see impact there. So marketing is starting to run some new campaigns, they're starting to run some new initiatives. It will have an impact on your activation rate. Most likely it will decrease it, because when you bring in a new audience, you will bring them on an onboarding process that hasn't been optimized for them. So usually you will see the activation rate go down. But this is a very important and good signal, because now you can react pretty quickly. So if you would wait until these people end up in revenue, you would wait 3 or 4 months. So then you waste a lot of opportunities. So it's better to immediately see, oh my God, marketing is running this new initiative, our activation rate dropped by 5%. You can segment then the activation rate by these 2 different marketing initiatives, hopefully if you have the setup right. Then you can see, oh yeah, look, the new ones come in. The interesting thing is like, it's not a signal that you have to get back to marketing and say, look, you're getting the wrong people. It might be one of the reasons, but it also might be that your onboarding flow is just not optimized for them. So this is the tricky thing with audiences. So you have a core audience that is very close connected to what you have built your product for, then you start to expand. And then the new people coming in, they have slightly different use cases. So maybe like you show the wrong use cases in the onboarding to them. Maybe it's something you have to ask them. It's okay, what do you actually want to do? You want to do this. So you have 3 different onboarding flows based on their use case. But again, this is classic product work. So product can find it out, can optimize it. And when you get a very fast feedback on your activation rate now starting to drop, you can start to act. And this is why this format is so really nice. So you can do it on a weekly base, you can do it on a monthly base, but you just have this one view where everyone is looking at core product performance. And that's it. So if you get here, I would say you're in a really good position. For 2027, because then you can do growth intelligence, and what you can do with all the metrics that you already have defined, you will create microsegments to understand, okay, what are actually the different kind of performances within these metrics. And microsegment for me is usually a combination of 3 or 4 attributes. So for example, you say, okay, people who first came from LinkedIn, who watched a webinar, who are on this type of plan and who have give us this kind of industry when they have signed up. So this is a microsegment. It's not an attribution, as you can see. So they were on LinkedIn with us at some point. So it's a combination of different kind of information that we have about this account. And we want to see which kind of these microsegments are actually overperforming, which ones are underperforming. Because the overperforming one, maybe it's easy to get more of them, so then we can tell marketing, hey, look, we have this very nice combination. They are really good in activation rate, really good in active rate, and they also convert really well into new subscriptions. Do you have a way to just get 1,000 more of these? So this is one thing. Or if they're underperforming, again, you can do the same exercise. You can say, okay, if we think they are still an audience for us, can we do something within our product to improve their experience? So can we improve their performance? So then you grow this segment, because the segment might look quite promising, because marketing can get a lot more of these people. So when we solve the whole product experience for them, we have a good opportunity of getting more of these people into the tool. And so this is growth intelligence. But as I said, building the steps before already takes some time, so we can put it in 2027, and so we can meet again. So I hope this was useful and you want to learn more about this. So I'm just building up my whole library of all the things that I do about product analytics, about growth intelligence. So check out my website. The link should be in one of the top comments, or it's in the video description. So check it out, check out more resources, learn more about this, ask questions in the comments. And then when all this comes together, just like the video, subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next video.